Rat Behavior and Extermination.
Excerpt from a series of interviews with street workers by rat catcher Lena. Used to be you'd go out with a bag, a stick with a nail at the end, and catch as many rats as you could at night. The city watch paid by weight. My husband Benjamin and I mostly worked alone, and we got by. If we found a place where the rats were real bad, sometimes we'd hire a crew of street brats to work with us, the younger ones who didn't make trouble. We'd pay them with bread and apple cider. Once the plague came, the rats were different. Meaner, bigger, a little quicker. You had to watch yourself. If you got cornered, they'd turn and the swarm would come back at you. I barely got away with my skin a few times. Down in the sewers. The bites hurt afterward. But it was the sounds they made that stayed in your dreams at night. It got more dangerous, and the city watch started paying better. But that didn't last long, because after a while, too many people had been stripped clean, trying to fill up a bag. One slip, and they'd be all over you, gnawing and trying to chew down to the bone. That's how I lost my poor Benji. The Rat Plague. Excerpt from a natural philosopher's notes. For over a year, I've studied this cursed plague, collecting and dissecting rats by the thousands. Given their rapid gestation and maturation cycle, it's been possible to breed them for numerous generations. The rodents themselves seem immune to the plague, but they pass it readily between numbers of their own species, perhaps through mites. The blood of the rats tells its own story, allowing me to gauge the numbers of generations that a given group of rats have lived with the plague. As such, a nagging question remains. The rats collected in the poorest parts of town, in the slums, exhibit the oldest strains of the plague, while those found near the docks, where the foreign plague-bearing rats would presumably have entered our city, exhibit a younger strain of the plague. Could this mean that the rats were transported to the slums in some way that is not obvious? I will continue my research. If nothing else, I am living proof that Sokolov's elixir and Piero's remedy are very effective at protecting against the plague, if one consumes enough of this stuff. Leviathan's Sorrow. Excerpt from a report on a treatise banned by the Red Shore Trade Council. Little is known of Picotti, credited with his series of pamphlets arguing against the whaling trade. While he's gifted, his views are nonsense and threaten the economic underpinnings of the empire. 1. Enslavement. On the breeding and husbanding of whales versus hunting the beasts in the wild. After a natural and free life cycle, Picotti offers no solutions for where these massive, malevolent creatures might be pastured. 2. Disillusion. Laments on the destruction of social bonds between herd members. Picotti actually uses the term families. 3. Harmony. Drivel on the aesthetic wonder of what is, in reality, the great and terrible ocean that ever threatens to swallow us. Includes arguments on the gentle nature of the brutes, a notion refuted by seamen who return to the shore wide-eyed with tales of the whale's savagery. 4. Disruption. Here Picotti is on his weakest footing, issuing of feverish warnings against the displacement or transference of natural beasts from their native environments. Sewer capacity in the month of Nets. Excerpt interview attached to a formal report by City Works Crew 17A. I'd been asked to tell the problem, so here it is. It's been every year that we work like men gone mad during the month of Nets. I don't hardly see my family. It's bad enough that the works is clogged with trash from the catch. Pieces of crates and nets. But the water smells of hagfish guts, too. We gotta get it done before the month of rain, or you know what. And it ain't like we got help from those pricks in civil engineering either. Been at this job for nigh on 28 years, and I never seen any of them come below, except to measure will it hold when they go putting up one of their fancy new bridges. So these last 3 years have been the worst, and here's why. It's the river crusts. Moved into the works, we hear a man ahead yell and scream like he's burning up. We climb fast, no other choice. Dr. Galvani's journal. I've been invited to a soiree at the Boyle estate. Of course, I won't attend. The 28th day of the 7th month, the month of high cold, is the day I met Anton Sokolov at the academy.
Why would I tarnish the anniversary of the most important day of my life by looking at aristocratic boots? I have no time for fools. I will be solving the riddle of this plague. Perhaps I'll raise a cup of Tibian red. On branding heretics, the heretic brand is reserved for those overseers who have committed heinous acts against the order, but have not broken codes that would otherwise result in execution. No contact, aid, or shelter can be given to one bearing the brand. That person is forevermore unwelcome to the Abbey and its affiliates. When used, the brand is applied to the forehead so all can see the sins of the recipient. The chemical compound acts immediately,
scarring the heretic for the remainder of life.
the interrogation room here at the office of the High Overseer stands ready for branding ritual, should the need arise. The recipient must be strapped into the interrogation chair and restrained as the brand is applied. The heretic brand itself is to be stored in the same room. The Great Trials. Excerpt from an Overseer's Findings. By High Overseer Teenan Wallace.
Spending 2 years in the company of heretics, the insane, and those rare black-hearted villains who are truly practitioners of magic,
I can say with truth that I have seen such things as to break the minds of most. While the trials and burnings weigh heavily upon my heart, I must chronicle what has been a unique opportunity to witness the multifarious perversions that the outsider bestows upon those who seek his black counsel. Many of those we faced were accused of bewitching their neighbors or family, controlling them from afar, or even walking around in their skins. And as I have seen this with my own eyes, as one woman slid into the form of another, prowling unseen until a vigilant overseer struck down both the witch and her host.
others, detailed herein, were found to stand in 2 places seemingly at once, or to vanish from one place and appear in another. Our work was dire, we knew, for if the followers of the outsider can truly inhabit the skin of another, or move from place to place like the wind, then how can we hope to erect walls to keep him out? It was these trials that first led us to investigate barriers beyond the physical. The Bone Charm Situation. Excerpt from a report to the Office of the High Overseer, by High Overseer Gerard.
I was asked, should we not tolerate the possession of simple bone charms among the populace? Surely this is a trivial matter, merely a cultural practice seen across the Isles. Not as terrible as the creation and coveting of more complex occult runes. Such is an insidious question. This foolish distinction weakens our mission while the stench of the outsider grows thick around us. Perhaps, as some claim, our ancestors tolerated these cursed practices during the times before our modern empire arose, to ease the lives of the lowliest serfs as they paved the road to civilization, but there is no excuse for witchery in this brighter industrial age. Having adjudicated the trials of many heretics myself, I swear their eyes, as the clarity of pain took their lives, were grateful to be liberated. The Ancient Music. Excerpt from a longer work. Throughout the natural world, there are ripples that we can barely perceive with our senses. An ancient music permeating everything as a fundamental structural rule. Through it, you can work wonders without violating the natural world or begging favors from unfriendly spirits. Throughout my studies, I have found a 17-note scale derived from this phenomenon, and with the right equipment, those notes allow for astonishing effects. Not the least of these is the ability to calm the turbulence originating in the void, which we attribute to the outsider. The Metaphysica Mysterium. Excerpt from a longer band work on supernatural ritual. It is said we should not sully our hands when combating the forces of the void. My studies have been deemed heretical by my brothers, but the rewards have been invaluable. I have harnessed the same energies employed by the outsider and his accursed followers while avoiding their corruption. I will prescribe a twofold method in this text. Indirection. As the unwholesome powers of the outsider use living flesh as a conduit, we can avoid being tainted by using the flesh of others instead. Containment. By using channels and barriers, we can focus these void energies in a raw state, shielding them from the perverse perspectives of the outsider. Looting in recent months. Excerpt from a letter found in an empty house at the edge of the Red Shore Financial District. The looting started in the warehouses. Once men took sick with the plague, the companies had to suspend operations. My husband, Malchus, was with the Marison Tobacco Leaf Company, which closed last year during the month of Clans. He ran the fire boxes at the main curing barn. Malchus always said flu curing made the sweetest leaf. Sickness hits the tobacco men hardest because of all the smoking. They ran with a small crew for a while, but around this time my husband got sick, the fires were put out and the tobacco sat rotting. Somehow the thieves knew and started stripping the place. Later, they moved on to houses. The bastards. The Outsider. Excerpt from the diary of a known heretic, seized before his execution. For most, the outsider is nothing but a child's tale meant to instill fear of that beyond the family, the community. When I was young, my mother and I were on the run, moving from one village or sea town to the next, camping in the woods for weeks, always with the cursed overseers at our backs. At night, she told me of her dreams, of the empty place where the outsider whispered to her. With each visit, her craft grew until she could see through the eyes of moths and unlock a door or window latch from outside a house. I will find this empty place. Somehow the key to open the void will fall into my hands. In time, I will learn the secret, and he will call to me as he called to her. Call me a heretic for my studies. Drag me to your comb-stoled cell, whip my flesh, and put me on trial as an apostate. Burn my body to ash.
But I will continue to seek the realm of which my mother spoke.
It is my life's meaning. Weeper identification and handling. Excerpt from notes by Dr. Galvani on proper procedure for handling those infected with plague. Once a victim bleeds from the eyes, you cannot help them. Death is inevitable, given our current understanding of the plague. However, following protocol, we can limit its spread. All personnel handling weepers, or those in the final stages, must consume liberal amounts of one of the available protective potions. Any of the variants will serve this purpose. Sokolov's elixir or Creo's remedy, for instance. A dose per day for the enlisted men. A dose twice daily for officers. Distance must be maintained, either through use of polearms
Or incendiary ranged weapons, in order to avoid parasitic stinging insects that colonize an infected host. After use, strict washing procedures must be followed with regard to washing the metal kennels, transport paddocks, and the carriages used to transport the infected to one of the deportation zones, such as the flooded district. Missing women, Golden Cat. Excerpt from a crime story revolving around the Golden Cat.
Mr. Ehrhoff, I assure you my family has the means to pay you and your associates, should you locate my sister. You've got her name, description, and everything else we know about her initial weeks in Dunwall, before Patrice stopped writing to me. However, there is one other detail, so hard to believe that I was reluctant to mention it. There is an establishment within Dunwall called the Golden Cat, a bathhouse, I believe, though some say it's a brothel.
I find it implausible that Patrice would ever be connected with such a place, but I would be remiss if I didn't pass along the information. The cousin of an old friend said he saw Patrice performing there, singing and playing the harp. It could be nothing, but please investigate. Lastly, if your search of the city has not borne fruit by the month of wind, I'll be making the trip from Morley myself in order to retain another agent. Sincerely, Madison Canebright. The Isle of Morley. Excerpt from a volume on Morley geography and culture. It's said that the history of Morley is as colorful as a quilt made from all the flags ever flown, and all the clothes ever worn. The land itself hides from the sun under a layer of clouds, and thick gray moss hangs from the trees. But the spirit of the people who live in Morley dances like the firelight. Among the people, the love of good food and drink is legendary, with stews and roasted meat dishes most often used to fight off the cold and the dreariness. The nation has a rich tradition of poets, musicians, and philosophers, even among the poorest folk. Intellectual tomes and bar songs alike were often penned in Morley. A late entry into the empire, the Morley insurrection is still a sore point for many natives, and independence is a proud character trait among the people. Tyrion's Journal, 26th day, month of wind. I finally found a new place where I should be able to hide and survive for a long time, if I stay quiet. The city watch condemned the building, so this basement should be a safe spot. I have to believe that. 28th day. Everything is going as I expected. The watch patrols in the streets nearby, but they never enter this building. Food is the only problem, but I managed to steal some during the night. Second day, month of darkness. Someone else found this place and wants to share it. He has a strange amulet made of bone, and he claims that it protects him from the plague. We'll see. Perhaps we can help each other, but I'm losing confidence in the odds of survival. Fourth day. Since he arrived, I've been having bad dreams, and I don't feel really well. There's more and more rats in the building. Soon I won't be able to leave this shack, even if I want to. I'm starting to think that his amulet is cursed. Whelping and training hounds. Excerpt from a hound trainer's guide. From each litter there is usually somewhere shy of 4 good pups, but we always drown the runt. Them that remain spend 3 or so months suckling from their mothers before we start them up with the training. It's simple at first, returning sticks and sitting still on command, only pissing outside and the like. But by the 8th month we got him hunting for scented sack dolls hidden in a scrub forest, killing wild pigs on command, and taking a man in padded armor down by hanging onto his forearm. At the end of the first year, we graduate the ones that have learned, and shoot the ones that haven't. The overseers take them after that, and we never see them again. Except once. Walking down Clavering Boulevard, an overseer passed me, preaching about the litany on the White Cliff, and the evils of witchery, and sure enough, his hound started whimpering and wagging its tail. That's how I knew it was one of mine. Whelped up from a pup. Granny Rag's diary. I can't trust him. You can't love what you don't trust. That's the song the birdies sing when the weather turns cold and forces them out of their nice homes they built. Nice homes spoiled and ruined. Useless now. So the birdies hate the weather that betrayed them. They fly away to look for new homes that aren't so cold and dreary, dreary, dreary. I'm leaving too. My valise is packed, so dreary everywhere I look. I can't bear it anymore. The Estate District. Excerpt from a historical overview of the Estate District. Home to some of the most powerful families in Dunwall, the Estate District has been a jewel in the city's crown for generations. No district enjoys finer restaurants or cultural events, and no families inspire more admiration or more gossip than the lords and ladies of the Estate District. The late Lord Boyle and his lovely wife perhaps best epitomize this privileged class of citizens. Their annual costume ball is the talk of high society, creating ripples throughout Dunwall when one family or another is excluded from the guest list. But it's not all play that drives the Boyles. On several occasions, they've generously brought in poor laborers from elsewhere in the city for a week or two to work on their garden or home, providing vital employment for those who need it most. With so much history, the Estate District has also seen its share of trouble, as fortunes are made and lost. The great Lord Preston Moray and his eccentric wife Vera were once the toast of Dunwall, before tragedy struck and they fell into ruin. Riddled with canals and large homes that enjoy historical preservation tax breaks, the Estate District is a place to which we can all aspire. The Lighthouse. Excerpt from a recent historical work on King Sparrow Island. King Sparrow Island sits in the middle of the Wrenhaven River, and up through the previous century, it was only used by fishermen and for occasional religious ceremonies. During the time of the Morley insurrection, a fort and naval dock were added to the island, as a means of protecting the city from attacks by sea. In the time of the Rat Plague crisis, shortly after the tragic death of Empress Jessamine Caldwin, Dunwall's acting regent, Hiram Burroughs, commissioned the construction of a modernized military installation and lighthouse on the island. Burroughs Lighthouse, only recently completed, is widely considered to be one of the marvels of the modern age, humming with Sokolov's technologies, powered by processed whale oil. The Abbey of the Everyman. Excerpt from a larger work on the history of the Overseers. The Abbey of the Everyman is the seat of religious power and inspiration for all overseers across the empire. The order arose over the years to protect the common people from the ravages of the outsider, until the need for a central bastion of authority was deemed necessary. This imposing structure is a destination for pilgrims seeking refuge or guidance. Many mistakenly attribute the abbey's construction to High Overseer Benjamin Holger, when it was in actuality Holger's successor, John Clavering, who laid the foundation. Shortly after the abbey was completed, every overseer in the land gathered there and began to trek to White Cliff. There, a great siege commenced, as the overseers purged the region. A battle raged against heretics, witches, and thralls of the outsider. Though Holger was killed in the struggle, White Cliff was cleansed, and the ceremonial rites that followed lasted for a month, giving birth to many invocations and speeches, which were inscribed in tomes and carried back to the abbey, where they are still revered today. The sewers beneath Dunwall. Excerpt from a light historical overview of the architecture of Dunwall. Across the generations, the aqueducts and tunnels beneath the city of Dunwall have served a variety of purposes. In the earliest days of the city's history, several primary canals were used to channel river overflow during times of flooding, and for a time it was fashionable for wealthy aristocrats to commission underground water passageways, giving them access to their estates from the Redhaven River and its minor tributaries. Over the years, these tunnels began to interconnect, sometimes by design and sometimes by accident. The history of the tunnel system is rich. As every schoolchild is taught, rebels used the sewers extensively during the Morley insurrection. As discussed in popular bar songs, lovers often find privacy in some of the cleaner entry points, with fresh air brought in on the winds from the river itself. On a darker note, in addition to seeing traffic from gangs and smugglers, it is rumored that the current royal spymaster himself, Hiram Burrows, has a network of informants who know the twists and turns of the sewer system by heart. Until recent times, the older tunnels suffered from repeated collapse, creating sinkholes that occasionally consumed entire street corners. The current system rarely suffers from such calamity, since the sewers were reinforced and expanded by the city planning department during the rule of Emperor Euhorn Colbin I. The High Overseer. Excerpt from a series on overseer roles and rituals. Over the centuries, the Abbey of the Everyman has held its place as the dominant religion across the Isles. Not only do its adherents call it the only meaningful faith, but aside from a few tolerated variants, they castigate the followers of other religions as heretics, actively resulting in harm rather than harmony. A key component of the Abbey's health is the High Overseer, venerated by all overseers, the women in the oracular order, and the congregations from each town and city across the empire. The High Overseer is called upon to interpret the 7 strictures, and to initiate important ceremonies such as the Fugue Feast at the end of each calendar year. Above all, the High Overseer must embody the strictures, serving as a living example of their perfection. Upon the death of the acting High Overseer, it falls upon a council made up of elder overseers to call for the Feast of Painted Kettles, the first step in the arduous process of choosing a new leader for the Abbey. Daughter of Tibia. Excerpt from a theater play. Young Amelia in the back garden. Duchess, I do not know of the world beyond these garden walls, but do not mistake my lack of experience for fear, or for an absence of desire. If I have avoided you, it is because of the warning your name carries. Duchess Colley, bending a rose to her face, inhaling the scent. And what warning is that, my dear Amelia? Young Lady Amelia, turning her back on the Duchess. I believe you know my meaning. Your father's tales are still the subject of parlor gossip. Duchess Colley, stepping close. And do those stories excite you? Tell me, girl, I am a friend. Young Lady Amelia, hesitating. Duchess Colley, yes, I confess they do. In my youth, I had a copy of the tales of Prince Calasar. I read them late into the night. Duchess Colley, speaking into her ear. As did I. Young Lady Amelia, leaning back into her embrace. But he was your father? Duchess Colley, stroking her neck. They're just stories, Amelia. Fire for the imagination. Young Lady Amelia, breathing deeply. Duchess, will you teach me to kiss? Young Lady Amelia. Duchess Colley, cooing softly. I will. But have you never kissed another? A Beery, a rose gardener, emerging from the hedges, stammering, My ladies, I swear to you, I did not intend to spy. Forgive me, but I was pruning the hedge, and could not find a way to interrupt. Duchess Colley, extending a hand. We forgive you, but as punishment, I command you to stay and to be closer. Young Lady Amelia, shocked, brows furrowed in irritation. But he is a servant, Duchess. Duchess Colley, pulling at each of them, drawing them closer to her. And serve us he will, young Amelia. The Royal Spymaster. Excerpt from a historical record of government positions and ranks. It is said that the office of the Royal Spymaster has existed for as long as there have been emperors and empresses. However, in the early days of the Empire, this position existed in secrecy, Only after the Morley insurrection was the position publicly acknowledged, due to the tremendous role that the acting spymaster played in quelling the rebellion. Originally, members of the military or officers of the City Watch were advocated for the role, chosen by the Admiralty. In recent years, the outgoing spymaster has made recommendations on his replacement from the small cadre of espionage agents serving him. In this way, continuity is preserved, since many of the covert projects undertaken by the government are not committed to writing, only communicated in whispers behind secure doors. This leads to the most common critique of the office of the Royal Spymaster, that actions are taken and deeds committed that even the Emperor or Empress is not aware of. This lack of oversight or accountability is a commonly debated topic. During parliamentary sessions. But those who hold the position of Royal Spymaster insist that in order to function, the role must exist outside existing bureaucracy or law. Bone Charms, excerpt from a book on sailing traditions in Scrimshaw. Bone charms, a sailor's blessing, they say. The carving itself is a practice from long back, passed from father to son. Old Man Salt to Greenhorn still getting his sea legs beneath him. In the old times, men cut into the tusks of ice seals, and into the arm-long fangs of bears that roamed the isles north of Tibia. Once the whale trade began, the practitioners went to engraving the bones of those great beasts, rendering charms that sing in the night, and grant some small boon to a man's vigor or defense against pregnancy. Donovan's Journal, excerpt from a worn journal. Everyone was looking for someone to blame for what happened. As the waters rose day by day, and one by one, the business owners had to give up their shops to ankle-high muck, and river crust started growing as far back as Thresh Street. Truth is, it wasn't some plot to wipe ever-prosperous Rudshore off Dunwall's maps. It was laziness and stupidity. The barriers keeping the rising waters out hadn't been maintained in at least a decade, and once one leak started, the whole thing gave out. City was so tied up fighting the plague, no one lifted a finger to salvage the place. It's been a year now, and living in a place the region's forgotten about has its perks.
The Greaves Whalehouse, excerpt from a book on well-established companies in Dunwall. In the early days, when the ships brought in the great dead whales, men would slaughter them and reduce their blubber to oil in massive vats on the banks of the Wren Haven.
Small crews maintain their own vats, with workers specializing as fire tenders, slicers, gutmen, haulers, or strainers. Inevitably, once the demand went up, the businessmen moved in, wooing the best crews with promises of better pay and safer conditions. The warehouses went up at the edges of the Rudshore financial district almost overnight. None was more organized, or as some would say, more ruthless, than the Greaves Whalehouse, opened by Ebenezer Greaves himself. The Greaves Whalehouse grew rapidly, absorbing rivals until it dominated the trade. At its peak, the operation employed over 300 workers, not including the children who filled minor and often tragic roles. Those associated with the refinery were recognizable by their head-to-toe industrial leather uniforms and the mask they wore to protect against fumes. On Hunting Whales, excerpt from a Forward Gaffer's Journal, by Old Grum. These new ships made by that Sokolov fellow make life easier than it was in my youth. I'll tell you what. Ere was, we were at the mercy of the winds. Nowadays, the engines get up at first whale sign, and there ain't timing out to rouse the boys from their bunks afore you're on the herd. We cull out the biggest bastard we can lay eyes on, and the pilots drag us out from the circling brutes. Them things groan and bellow across the water, like they're calling to each other. Men below say you can feel it in the hull. But when the harpoons go in, the beast cannot make for deep water no more. Once it weaks from last blood, we launch the hook boat and put chains into the tail. Then the winches drag the bastard backward up the chute and into the rigging overhead.
Whale Vivisection, excerpt from the notes of a natural philosopher aboard a whaling ship.
Remarkably, each specimen I had the pleasure of studying during the voyage possessed some minor variance in physiology. On the second leg of the trip, east of Tibia, the crew hauled aboard a female, some 42 feet in length. I estimate she weighed 35 tons, and the ship sat low, rocking side to side through the night with her thrashing. By candlelight, I took her apart, sketching and taking notes. Against her bellowing, I cut into the mass of tentacles around her mouth. Within, I found row upon row of teeth, and a baleen running along the upper jaw. Through this broom-like structure, I assumed she filtered food from the water that was too small to be chewed. Whale oil processing,
Excerpt from the founder of the Greaves Whale House by Ebenezer Greaves. Out at sea, they secure the beast with hooks, with lines cast from the main ship and from several smaller boats. Bayous keep the whale from diving deep. Once it's caught, a larger hook is driven through the tail, which is used to hoist the creature up through the chute. They moan and bellow for some time as the men get them onto the deck, then lift them into the scaffolding overhead. The ship adjusts its prow and returns to port in Dunwall, where the crew works on the great creature, slicing off the fattest parts while it still lives. The Eradication of Black Sally, excerpt from a popular story of crime and daring, by Jules Robin in the City Watch. Before Slackjaw ran the streets in the Distillery District, there is no boss more ruthless, violent, or dedicated to squeezing the average citizens for a coin than Black Sally. Like so many from Morley, she was pale-skinned and green-eyed, with hair as black as the void. They say that she started young, and as a girl she'd stun a man with her looks, coming upon him in an alley, then smile a one-sided smile, and suddenly run him through with a knife. She'd have his money and be on her way before he breathed his final breath. As a boss, she was worse, ruling over the meanest street gang Dunwall had seen up to that time. Her operation touched everything from shipping to prostitution. She even had a racket going with the Bakers Guild. A finger in every pie indeed. One man, Watch Captain Jules Robin, made it his mission to stop her, and kept the case going for half a decade. Black Sally met her end when Robin had his men light smoke fires in barrels, near the warehouse where she hid out during the day. As she and her gang rushed into the streets, terrified the building was burning, Captain Robin and his top officers threw nets over them, and ran them all through with blade and pistol shot. Empress Jessamine Coldwin, excerpt from a book on the late Empress. Many of those who lived through her reign will weep until the ends of their lives over the pale beauty with piercing eyes, and the foul end she met at the hands of her own twisted servant and protector. In her father's day, the Coldwins were thrust into the limelight, despite their distance to the throne, when the former dynasty provided no heirs. A prosperous age followed the emperor, but his daughter would have different luck. During her short life, political intrigue and minor conflicts creaked cracks in the empire, undermining unity across the Isles. The Rat Plague, however, was a terror for which neither Empress Coldwin nor any other living being was prepared. Dowd's Log, the latest entry. 18 years on this wretched rock in the city of filth. I felt the blood of scholars, of noble pedophiles, of guildsmen, of unfaithful lovers, of politicians who are far too just for their own good, and of law enforcers who came too close to bring the wrong man to justice. Why should an empress be any different? Why should I feel the entire weight of this dying city crushing down on my back? Corvo, Lord Protector, is of Serconus, just as I once was. I might have known that fact already, but it didn't matter until I recognized it in his face. It brought back distant memories of home and the optimistic young man I once was. What would I find if I went back there? Would I find that it has rotted from the inside, just like Dunwall? Or will it only appear that way because I'm the one who's rotted?
The Red Shore Chamber of Commerce, excerpt from a book covering the various districts across Dunwall and their histories. Once the financial heart of the empire, the Red Shore Financial District was a hive of trade activity. No district employed more barristers, accountants, or indeed more security, and no part of Dunwall saw a greater flow of coin. When the flood barriers broke and the waters rolled in, the looting that followed was accomplished by an epic period of chaos and butchery. Those who could withdraw and move their assets did what they could. Others, with their wealth tied up in grand mansions and artwork, lost it all. When the last of the high society set had withdrawn and the lights went dark, Red Shore was a gloomy, crumbling shell of what it had been, inhabited by thieves, wild dogs, and rats. Once great palaces of commerce sat empty and haunted, or come to house killers and mercenaries, as well as anyone else looking to hide from the city watch. In mere months, the flooded district was settled upon as the most proper name for the place. The Royal Protector, excerpt from a historical record of government positions and ranks. Throughout the ages, rulers have always faced attempts on their lives. Once in a generation, the empire is rocked by the death of a powerful political or religious figure. As such, city-states across the Isles have devised varying strategies for protecting their leaders. In the capital city of Dunwall, each new emperor is allowed to appoint a royal protector. This is far more than a trusted bodyguard, much more revered than the hand-chosen guards defending Dunwall Tower, or the food tasters. The royal protector is a court figure, given enormous latitude, who keeps constant company with the highest ruler in the known world. At the age of 12, the young monarch participates in the selection process, making the final decision about who will safeguard his or her life. While most of those chosen as royal protector have been men, several times throughout history, a woman has served well in the role. For the first time in Dunwall's history, a monarch has been slain by her own bodyguard. At the time of this writing, with Dunwall in the grip of the worst plague ever recorded, our fair Empress Jessamine Caldwin has just been murdered. The deed was done by her former royal protector turned assassin, Corvo Attano, who is still sitting in Coleridge Prison awaiting his deserved execution. Some argue that it is worth noting that Corvo Attano is the first royal protector in the history of the Empire born outside the Isle of Bristol.
Mace Brimsley's Journal. Day 1. When the dead counter came, I was certain that if they discovered the illness of my wife, then I would be taken as well. I commanded her to feign death, and I did the same in the hope the inspectors would be either too lazy or too stupid to care. True to my suspicion, we were loaded onto the plague wagon, without them even bothering to check us for pulse. The dead counter seemed only concerned in the value of our estate. Day 2. I cannot be certain if it was luck or cruel fate that I should survive the drop from the plague wagon. I suspect it might be a curse, for my darling wife not only survived unscathed as well, but the experience nor the plague have done a thing to halt her nagging mouth. Soon we discovered that we were not the only survivors, and in fact a small band huddles close to Redshore Gates, begging for any chance of freedom. Day 3. Certainly by now I should be feeling the effects of the sickness within my chest and throat, but aside from dehydration and the pains of an empty stomach, I feel nothing. Strange-smelling manuscript. Excerpt from an untitled manuscript written in a scrawling hand. Stronger than Scrimshaw? A skull full of guile. Whale bile, bones in a pile. White scrapes gleaming, kindle fire and crackle fat. Big black gobs of spat. Fume up, feathers. Mad-eyed bird fell to ground. Seeds, nettle, needly. Needles, see. Stir a bit. Explorer's Journal. Excerpt from the Journal of an Explorer and Natural Philosopher. Dr. Hazian's interpretations of the Pandician carvings are the height of ignorance. The core theme is not renewal, but dire warning. The central figure is not a benign spirit. It is clearly a monster, and the jewel a type of fetish, the key to its dark potency perhaps. The panels should be read as follows. The hero figure steals the jewel from the monster and casts it into an unquenchable fire. Thus the monster is made mortal, and the hero is able to slay it, breaking the cycle of terror. Notes scrawled in the margins. Vera has taken an inordinate interest in my field manuals. Such appetite are unseemingly in a lady of our station. I shall have to reprimand her. Second note, written in a different hand. So dreary, dreary, dearie.